We're going to get into music as magic. That might help. I think it's the other, maybe that's what's going on. All right. So this is session 4 in our series on metaphysics of music and the 7 of arts and sciences. So, and through going through music as magic, we're also going to touch on and start dealing with the 7 chakras, and we'll jump around in terms of a lot of different little concepts and ideas. Probably also get into the 7-fold constitution of humans and touch on that. This comes out of chapter 1 in New Age Bible Interpretation, volume, I believe it's 7, by Helene Kareem. So it talks about the occult power of music. Our present materialistic age has all but forgotten the divine power of music, which was well known and demonstrated fact among the ancients. The musicians who took part in temple rites were initiates, who knew how to employ both rhythm and harmony to promote the highest spiritual good of all the assembly, both participants and spectators. There's a number of keys that are in here. One is that the musicians of the temple were initiates, which means they were initiated into the esoteric knowledge. They knew sacred astronomy, astrology, number, geometry, music, rhetoric, grammar, and logic. They were guided by the 10 virtues, which means they had actually evolved to where they had liberated themselves from their dependency and imprisonment in the material plane. So they were actually operating from a spiritual or higher level of consciousness. They were actually operating through their spiritual self or their soul consciousness. Because Plato, go ahead. Sure. A few up here. Anyone doesn't have one of these? It says, Plato states that the Egyptians accredit their sacred melodies to the goddess Isis. Their music, he adds, had power to subdue man's passions and to purify his spirit. With Egypt's downfall, the best and highest in her sacred music passed into Greece and to Palestine. The musical rites and forms of Solomon's temple were adopted largely from the temple of Egypt, or Kemet. And of course, we're talking about the so-called Jewish or Hebrew extension that came out of Kemet. When Solomon was married to the daughter of Pharaoh, Sarah, legend has it that she brought to Israel 1,000 varieties of musical instruments. Now, if we're looking at the occult power of music and music as magic and looking at the metaphysics or esoteric aspects of music, we then also have to understand and be able to decipher or pull out of it various symbolisms that also give you keys to what it's talking about. So in that statement, what do you think I'm talking about? It says, when Solomon was married to the daughter of Pharaoh, Sarah, legend has it that she brought to Israel 1,000 varieties of musical instruments. There should be some things there that should trigger your mind as a clue. So what would that be? Right. And what does that trigger? So what else? Yes. What comes, if you say 1,000, what sum should come from your mind? What comes to your mind? Like what? Just throw something out. What, more than 1,000 instruments? Okay, let's go. Okay. Well, she comes, well, legend has it, right? And so you're saying that in ancient times, musicians were initiates, and then how did initiates communicate? They communicate in symbolism and allegory, right? So then with legend, that is symbols and allegory, it has an esoteric or inner meaning to it. So then, also that can be read is Pharaoh is who? Pharaoh is what? Make it easy, don't make it hard. You say Pharaoh, what comes to your mind? Now reiterate this, the part of the class is also to start liberating how you think and your ability to be free in your thinking, and don't be so guarded in terms of afraid that what you're thinking may be wrong, and be able to say some things that come into your mind is coming to your mind for a reason. And so then if you can articulate that, it will lead you somewhere. In one sense, but what is the Pharaoh? Just think about the Pharaoh. The image of a Pharaoh, what do you see? Right. He's a leader. Right. Okay. What else? What else is related to the symbol of a Pharaoh? The crown. He's a what? He's like a living God. Okay. For all that has esoteric meaning to it. Because where's the crown worn? Right, it's worn on your head. Worn on the crown of your head, of the cerebral cortex, which is where your higher reasoning powers exist, on the crown of your head. Right? And the cerebral cortex sits between what? Temple. So that where's the temple? And the Pharaoh is the king or the leader or the head. Well, what else is 1,000 related to? Right. When you think of 1,000, you just came out a number, and 1,000 represents the crown chakra, the 1,000-petal lotus. Crown chakra. Pharaoh wears a crown. 1,000 instruments. What's an instrument? Instrument is a way to play or some form of energy or vibration. And 1,000-petal lotus is made up of the frequencies of the highest frequency in the hierarchy of the human energy fields or levels of 7 levels of energy. All I'm saying is, but just trying to also show you is how there's always a double meaning that is there, and you can pick up so much more information once you start cluing in to certain keys. Solomon is also related to soul of man. Sol, S-O-L, also relates to sun. The son of man is the soul, or the light in you. The light is synonymous with knowledge, but also light is knowing. And then all life comes from light or energy. So then Solomon's temple, in one sense they relate to a physical temple, but the true Solomon's temple is a temple of the soul of man, which is you. And you can say the daughter of the Pharaoh is in the feminine expression of the Pharaoh, which would be the receptive side of the king, who then marries, unites with Solomon, and then brings back thousands of musical instruments. But the key there was the 1,000. Was the key. 1,000 for the lotus. 1,000 really also represents the crown of achievement. It's one taken to 1,000 power. But
when I first read that, I couldn't imagine 1,000 instruments.
right.
1,000 varieties that you that.
Right. So it's not just really talking about physical instruments. It's talking about, because the instrument is the means of transmitting information or of expressing various energy rates. In you have the 1,000. You can create thousands of variations of expression of energy through yourself. Anyway, so it is further stated that one of the principal reasons for Sheba's visit to Solomon was her interest in the esoteric power attainable by the right use of the proper temple music, in which Solomon was an adept. The Psalms, which have come down to us, include many sacred songs which were originally intoned in particular keynotes and particular rhythms, and these were known to affect the mind and character of the worshippers and the neophytes. Hebrew Kabbalism, like Egyptian occultism, recognizes three principles of man, or human: spirit, soul, and body. So on that, I'm passing a handout on the sevenfold constitutions of humans. And what it does, it starts to break down the sevenfold nature of humans, but also gives it in the context of the threefold division of body, soul, and spirit. And I'm also passing this out because the highest purpose that we're really trying to achieve is to understand how various types of music affect you and affect various aspects of yourself or your own temple. And how these various levels of yourself represents the characters or the participants who dwell in your temple. And the goal is how to harmonize and raise their level of consciousness up to the highest level, where they then become servants of the God within you. And it also lets you look at the different systems and how they all talk about the same ideas that come from a different language or different terminology, but the terminology is really all equated to the same type of energy expression. And from an astrological perspective, the body can be looked at or seen as the ascendant or your rising sign. The soul can be looked at as the moon, and the spirit as the sun.
Body is
Ascendant, your rising sun, relates to the body. First contemplation to the physical body. The soul is related to the moon, and the spirit is related to the sun.
I don't understand.
Understand this chart? What don't you understand?
I understand spiritual.
Right?
But I'm not sure I understand the seven different
In terms of the physical, etheric, emotional, mental, higher mental, intuitive, and divine. Because it deals with that which is organic. Collective unconscious is that dimension out of which all things come. So it's like it's the organic connection between all things. All things are connected organically because all things are part of the life force. So that there's knowledge in, and then understanding that your physical body, and we'll talk a little bit about that, your physical body actually is based upon a blueprint, an energetic blueprint. The physical body doesn't generate the energetic body. The energetic body creates a blueprint around which the physical body forms itself. So like when I say when people cut off their arms, or get part of their body's amputated, sometimes there's still sensations in what used to be where other parts of the body existed, and that if you can look at it through Aquarian photography, you can still see the outline of that organism, because etherically your body is formed like a blueprint. The blueprint for the physical body is an electromagnetic field. And so then, there's a whole body of knowledge. We talked about this. We have the capacity to regenerate cells and limbs. The capacity is latent within us because the pattern still exists, and cells multiply themselves and then conform to the particular part of the body upon which they form. All basic cells are based upon the same structure. It's just as they then shift to do different needs, there's a certain biochemical change that then makes them operate heart cell, hair cell, whatever. And so the point is, I had to bring, there's a number of books. One is called, not the vibratory body. One is called Vibratory Medicine, and there's another one. There's a whole body. Anyway, what I'm getting at is that you talk about the unconscious mind, the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is that dimension that interconnects all things. And that's directly connected to your energetic or your organic self. So, in one sense, if we were not mistrained, miseducated, and out of touch with our natural organic self, we could literally go into our natural organic self and get knowledge. Because your natural organic self is actually operates based upon cosmic principles. I mean, the way your body operates is based upon divine or cosmic laws. So if you could actually go in and contact your own self, you then would actually be contacting the universe operating through you. Because what's governing the operation of this self is those same principles, the same laws. You follow what I'm saying? And so you literally, because energetically we each have an aura or energetic emanation that comes off of us. If we were sensitive enough, well, first of all, if you were super sensitive, you could just hold an image of something in your mind. In your mind, because you hold the image in your mind, the image itself is a resonance, it's a vibratory rate, right? Which then it will put you into connection with that thing. Because the energy field in the universe is unbroken, which means we are connected to all things in the universe. The only thing that keeps us from registering it is our level of consciousness. So what I'm saying is that this energetic presence, which represents the collective unconscious, we're all bathed in it. It's like the nude. Right. And so with spirit. What we need to look at and think about when we're talking about spirit and body is the electromagnetic spectrum. When you go from infrared to infrared to ultraviolet. Now outside of infrared and outside of ultraviolet, you cannot, the human eye doesn't register those frequencies. But those other frequencies still exist and are all around you all the time. They're physical. When we talk about spirit, it's not like something that doesn't exist. It's a physical. It's physical. Because spirit is basically the universal laws that govern all things. So the only difference between spirit and matter is that spirit is pure spirit is at one extreme, and pure matter is at the other extreme. But they're on a continuum, like two poles, positive and negative. They're two poles of one continuum. So they all exist. It's just that some of them operate at such a higher level of frequency, you don't register it. But you have the capacity to register it if you will do the work to purify yourself to a level that you could register it. Which is, when they talk about initiates and adepts and masters, what the work that they've done is to refine and master each of these levels of themselves to eventually build and elevate their consciousness to the highest level of operation. But like right now, we are in contact with the collective unconscious all the time. So because of where our consciousness is, how we register it, and it's reflected on our conscious mind, it might just be an itch or whatever it may be. So as you evolve or elevate your consciousness, then you become aware of things that you're already involved in. You're already connected to the spiritual world. You're already connected to the mineral world. You're connected to all these things. Because of your level of consciousness, you don't register it consciously.
Okay. The field of consciousness, that's where most people reside.
No.
I mean,
No, they don't. So you said most people.
But what I mean is, we're talking about the whole idea is to merge your external self.
Yeah, personality, your outer self, yeah. Right.
And the external is that field of consciousness, that external personality.
The field of consciousness represents what you are aware of, what you're conscious of. That's your field of consciousness. So it's equated with the higher mind, the human consciousness, and intelligence. Now below that, most people are not operating at that level. Most people are operating down at the animal level. The lower mind. If you look at what most people are concerned with, is more lower mind and animal issues. You know, food, cars, clothes, sex, power, you know, status, how, you know, I'm controlled, you know, territorial dominion, protection. Yeah. So anyway, why I passed it out was for a number of things. One is because we're going to go into the sevenfold constitution, we're going to go into the chakras. The chakras are related to the 7 divisions. This gives you different words for these different levels of consciousness. And so, again, a part of my work is to share with you the body of knowledge so that you will become, ideally, a Gnostic or a knower and become a more universally conscious person. So you don't get stuck in one school, but you understand and become bilingual, where you can speak the different languages and know when somebody's talking over here about the higher mind, over here somebody's talking about the Christ consciousness, somebody over here is talking about higher intelligence, somebody over here is talking about human consciousness. All those things are equivalent. And so what eventually out of this process, what happens is like your frame of reference is changed and your logic and your reasoning elevates and operates from a different level. And that's the last of the arts, is logic or dialectics. So anyway, again, this stuff, a lot of this stuff this comes from an older chart that was probably done back in the 70s. It was, like I said, it was adapted to a Black Gnostic Studies chart, and this, each one of these levels is a whole school, a whole course of study. So anyway, we'll come back to this. So that took us back to where we were saying Hebrew Kabbalism, like Egyptian occultism, recognizes three principles of man: spirit, soul, and body. So you have a trinity that's going on here: spirit, soul, and body. Then you also have some clues because it says Hebrew Kabbalism like Egyptian occultism. So Hebrew Kabbalism is actually the same as Egyptian occultism, but as expressed through that particular time and space. Because if you go up further, it says, in the beginning, with Egypt's downfall, the best and highest in her sacred music passed into Greece and Palestine. We're talking about Greece being the origin of the Western civilization, and Palestine being the modern state, really, of the Semitic order, of the so-called, now the whole so-called Jewish order. Because then it's saying that their origins come out of Kemet. So then in studying some of their sacred teachings, you're actually studying fragments of your own sacred teachings. But I'm also, again, what I'm talking about is clues. See, there's so much in here that can be brought out that can really enrich your understanding. Anyway, the Egyptians depict in their tomb painting the double of the man which leaves the body at death, which must be reckoned with even during the lifetime on earth when that double is part of the living organism. This double is the particular part of man's invisible structure most affected by the repetition of strong rhythms and the intoning of specific key notes. This is a critical piece right here. So basically it's talking about your etheric double, or your auric field, or your energetic field, and how it's through your energetic field that is most sensitive to repetition of rhythms and intoning of specific keynotes or vibrations. Even slightly sensitive people feel vibrations within the body aroused by the impact of musical sounds and distinct rhythmic patterns. Deaf people feel the vibrations of music through the floor by touching the musical instruments from which they can perceive. It's interesting to know how many people still look at or identify with only a certain area of jazz music, or so-called jazz music. So I just dismissed that as a certain aspect of ignorance and probably racial bias in terms of how a lot of the Anglos that were writing at this time did not have intimate relationship with African and black culture, and were not really aware of the real significance of a lot of things that we did. So you got to read everything with a grain of salt. The double here spoken of is etheric in substance and therefore entirely physical. So I pass on the sevenfold constitution because it's giving you keys to understand with the etheric, how the etheric and the physical are connected, and how the etheric is your life related to your vital body. So vitality is directly related to your etheric body, which is directly impacted by frequencies and vibrations. So you can raise or lower your energy level by the type of sounds and vibrations you absorb or that's in your environment. Now everything gives off a vibration. Shapes, colors, images, sound, textures. So now, with that in mind, drive around through the black community and look at shapes, colors, textures, sounds, smells, and see what type of environment is constantly bombarding or stimulating the physical organism of the people that live in that space. Now go out to a more fluent environment and see what you see in terms of color, sound, even in terms of the shrubbery and landscaping, the color of the building, the textures, the designs, all of that is constantly impacting the consciousness, or really the subconscious level of the people, that then is forming how they relate to themselves or don't relate to themselves. And remember, what hits you subconsciously is more powerful than what you're conscious of. Yeah.
How do you suppose, what is the definition of classical music?
Their definition of classical music is like Beethoven, Bach, what is it, Wagner, Stravinsky.
But without calling it related,
those people that play that kind of music. I don't know, I need to look it up.
Could you render it classical without because
Okay.
I think the way for somebody is where you put but the music is
Right. 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 Right.
But does that fit into you shouldn't fit into the European looking for music that like real things through classical?
Right. Right. Well, basically, our classical, they define classical a certain way. And it's based upon that whole field of music that was, the various operatic, the operatic, what is the other one that they were writing these music for, that was really during the Renaissance period. And all those individuals that were really writing that music, the originators of it were students or initiates themselves. A lot that came after them who were their students may not have known what was the source for the patterns and the concepts, but then by imitating their teachers, they then perpetuate those things and may not have known. Like Beethoven and Wagner were literally creating music that was telling a story about initiation and the various changes that one goes through as they evolve at different levels of consciousness. Or they came in and started talking about astrological energy and then intoned those energies at different keys and then talked about the interaction between Mars and Venus. But they did it musically because Mars was a certain tone and Venus was a certain tone, certain key. So then they then use those keys as the basis to then create an interaction that then translates into a very operatic, or what's the other they call it? Another opera, what is it? Symphonic and those kind of things. But those same laws apply to Chinese classical music and Indian classical music and Kemetic classical music and tribal African classical music. The same things are going on.
I happen to be listening to you the other day, and somebody wrote a letter saying, I really enjoyed the piece you did on African American jazz. Totally saying you made a lot of it. But I wonder how certain classical artists would feel with them getting the credit for what they're doing when they actually got it from people like Beethoven and so on.
So they don't know where they got the stuff
And I
from.
thought that was directly related to what we said.
In terms of, this person was indicating that jazz musicians actually learned or got their understanding of music from classical musicians. But then they don't know their history.
But that's the European point.
Of course. Well, until we create our own means of transmission knowledge and control those things, they're going to keep it going too. Anyway, let's keep going here in terms of this etheric matrix. It says this is not a spiritual principle. It's talking about the etheric double. It is not immortal. It is a soul which dies, which I don't totally agree with that. It can be shattered by destructive vibrations. It can be made relatively immortal by constructive vibrations, such as constitute sacred music. I think the greater key we're looking at is that word sacred music as opposed to classical. Because when we talk about sacred music, sacred music is music that is actually constructed based upon spiritual principles, that has specific effects that are guiding the structure of the music. As it is the matrix, this etheric double is the matrix which holds the physical, visible body. The condition of the double determines health and longevity. Any vibration which affects the etheric double adversely affects the body adversely as well. Hence we see that the music used in temples or in churches today has a very real effect upon our lives. But not only in temples or churches, it's music, period. Then he kind of goes on and talks about the Old Testament and Psalms and Song in Exile and Exodus, and how these various books were various musical compositions that have specific purposes. And he goes on and talks about how many of the books in the Bible the original books in the Bible have been lost, and that the Old Testament shows every evidence of having been radically and extensively edited by many succeeding generations of editors. It says, the Old Testament literature shows every evidence of having been radically and extensively edited by many succeeding generations of editors. What does he mean? Why? Because it says that contrary to popular opinion, the Old Testament literature shows every evidence of having been radically and extensively edited by many succeeding generations of editors. Basically because a lot of the books are rearranged, and some of the wording and some of the books don't match the succeeding books, and that if you really study the Bible, you can see certain concept ideas match other concept ideas in other chapters, and that there's inconsistencies in terms of how terminology is used, certain concepts and various things like that. And if you study the various time periods, you will see the similar types of ideas and language in different books, but they come from different times. And so if you get into that, then you say, well, wait a minute, this person appears, if you look at the evidence of the literature, to come out of a certain time period, and the next book is from another time period, and the next book from a different time period. So somebody had to take these books and put them together this way, because it's not a chronological and coherent transition from one book to the other. So based upon the particular generation and where they were coming from, they then would pull together and edit the book to meet their own particular need. And basically she's also then telling people is that the Bibles are man-made. They do express divine principles and divine knowledge, but they were developed, interpreted, translated, and put together by humans relative to particular time and spaces, which then helps to liberate people from just being able to then be dominated or governed because someone said or interprets the Bible in a certain way. And because that person holds a certain position in their community, be it that he is a priest or a rabbi or whatever, then because he is supposed to be trained and ordained by God, then he has a greater authority in interpreting the Word of God, which is supposed to be the book. And then thusly, I can then control you by how I interpret what Scripture is relative to your behavior today. So then if I go and say that the Bible says that abortion is a crime against God, and then you say you believe in God and follow God, then you have to follow my logic and then behave accordingly. But then once you know that the Bible is an edited body of knowledge, then it frees you from the dependency for someone saying that this is pure God's word and you can't question it. And the role or the part of esoteric Christianity, because basically Helen Kareem come out of the school that came out of the mid-1880s and on forward, there was a whole spiritualist movement that really kind of became crystallized in theosophy by Madame Blavatsky's school, that were trying to break the dogmatic and the exoteric or materialistic bond of Christianity on mass consciousness, which was really leading us into destruction. Because the majority of the world war and all these various mass persecution and destruction have been done under the guise of divine guidance or working for Christian order. Right. So a part of the work of this literature is to start breaking that dependency on that kind of thinking. I guess I'm not going to go through all this. It talked about how different songs, different psalms were played at particular times of the year, at particular times of the day, in certain months, which goes into an astrological, astronomical understanding, which we will in. That's fine. So then, get into that, because it just lets you understand. And that takes me to the next piece here. So basically what I'm doing is material on that. This comes out of Sacred Science by Swallow de Lupin. It's on page 184. It's called Harmony. And again, savor these key ideas, because it says, the principle of harmony is cosmic law, the voice of God. Whatever the discord caused by man or natural accident, nature, if left to her own devices, will reestablish order by means of affinity. The consciousness innate in all things. It goes back to when we say the collective unconscious, right? It's innate in all things. So if you can get out of the way and allow the natural order of things to operate, then that's how they say the doctors do not heal you. They just help create conditions where you can heal yourself. The key thing is that there is a underlying innate operation of harmony that exists in all things. That's why meditation becomes so important. Because as you shut down the noise, if you look at the sevenfold concept of humans, the lower self is the mineral, vegetable, animal, or it's the sensuality, desire body, the lower mind, or it's the levels of the unconscious. The lower self is where the noise comes from. Meditation is housed up in the intuitive mind, where you're intuitively wise, which is what becomes guided or directed by the higher mind. The higher mind deals with intelligence, but it also deals with the higher philosophical concepts. So then you're saying, well, philosophically, I want to elevate myself or go to a deeper place. That can come mystically through a feeling, or it can come intellectually by you encountering certain knowledge, and that knowledge strikes you in a certain way, and you want to then follow it. So that's your higher mind registering this. Then by your higher mind registering this, then you start to apply certain techniques from that level. And when you apply certain techniques from that level, what happens is, I'm talking about meditation, and it's getting back to you contacting the innate harmony of the universe or the voice of God in yourself, and trying to relate it to this chart in terms of how you then can use this as a way to climb or elevate your consciousness. Because through meditation, you have control of your physical body, which means you still yourself physically. That's why you have to keep yourself in shape. Because if you don't keep yourself in shape and your body's stiff, or you're overweight, or you got problems, or you can't breathe right, or whatever, those physical things create dissidence, right? It creates agitation. It creates noise that then impedes the innate voice in you to register clearly on your own mind. That's why keeping yourself physically in shape, diet, and nutrition is very important, because it deals with the physical and the etheric body. Because different types of foods that you eat carry different vibratory rates based upon the quality of the food. So if you eat a lot of low quality food, that means the vibratory rate is low, so you're lowering your vibratory rate, which means then you can't respond to higher levels of frequencies or higher levels of consciousness. And so it also impacts you energetically, because everything carries an energetic frequency with it. So thoughts and ideas, all those things are translated into frequency that then either elevates or retards your own cumulative frequency level. So you say, okay, what kind of thoughts am I harboring? What kind of feelings am I harboring? Where's my physical body? Is it in shape, or am I limping, or is it, am I got aches and pains? All that then directs your consciousness down here. As you start to master those things, then it then starts. Because what you want to do is lose the conscious attention to your physical body. Then can you sit there for 15 minutes and don't be controlled or get caught up into how you're feeling? Because a part of it is like, I'm getting tired of sitting like this. Or what is supposed to be happening? Well, that's the mind. The emotion is like, I'm getting bored, or I'm getting restless, or I'm getting agitated, or whatever. So then as your consciousness has to entertain that, and that's where your mind goes, your energy goes there. That's why learning to control your emotions, then your mind, your thoughts. You sit there and next thing all kinds of stuff starts going through your mind. Well, the thing we talked about is learning how to not entertain it, let it be, but don't start entertaining it. Because once you start to entertain it, then you become connected to it, and it takes you off on a journey. So once you can not be moved by those things, what is left is your intuitive mind. And so when they talk about that you can't storm the gates of heaven, what they're really talking about is that you can't force this connection. It's not about forcing the connection, it's about letting go. And then the ultimate goal is for you to be able to carry that sense of kind of inner harmony or quiet with you as you go through your day. And even if you're in the middle of hell, inside of you, you've got a space of peace. Which then means that you stay in tune with your intuitive mind, which is the voice of your soul, and your soul knows. Which means that you will always know what to do. Question? Yes. Right. Yeah. But then how do you interpret that? What I interpret it as, first of all, we said that all of us are here for a purpose, right? Because all of us are cells in the body of a human species. The human species itself is a level of consciousness. Right. We're part of the whole organic whole. We're part of the whole evolution of the earth. because the earth provides the physical or the mineral out of which the physical body is formed, which then creates the foundation for the vegetable kingdom, which then provides the foundation for the animal kingdom, which then provides the foundation for the human kingdom. Which means that humans are a strata of the evolving earth. And you can go back to a vegetable kingdom, a mineral kingdom, etc. Right? So then we're evolving. The earth itself is evolving. And so it's evolving form to register the highest level. So the highest level is drawing the form to shape themselves to be able to register the highest level. So we're being drawn home to that level of consciousness. So based on your question, because each of us are drawn here at a particular time and space because we contain the potential quality to add to the harmony of our time, to help neutralize some of the discord. We have the capacity to do this. And so by listening and getting in tune with your inner self, your inner voice, your higher mind, spiritual self, etc., then it will provide you with your particular orders. And so then as you express that, then you will be playing your particular role in the whole body. So in that sense, sure, you're spreading the Word of God, because the Word of God is harmony, so as you spread harmony, you're spreading the Word of God. If you're spreading discord, then that's the devil, the opposite. So those that create discord in the world are followers of the devil. But in the greater scheme of things, say the Tao, right? The Tao says when you get to the maximum of one thing, it precipitates or it brings into being its opposite. So even through negativity, you can also eventually come to good. If you got to do that, yeah, you got to go that way. Yeah.
But when you talk about spreading to other people, spreading what you have, I think it's spreading what you have inside of you to other people. Well, don't we all have our own voice of God within us, and do I necessarily need what your voice is telling you on the inside of you, because I have my own on the inside of you? You follow me?
I follow what you're saying. And so you're saying that to say that this person doesn't need to spread anything.
Just be. Listen to their own, and
It's the same. That's the same difference.
but what I'm saying is, I see what you're saying.
Right.
But what I'm saying further
Right.
is, okay, if you be, you're spreading the harmony.
Right.
But if I understand him correctly, he may actually attempt to go energy towards influencing others in accordance with what you heard your inner person, trusting God, thinks.
But that is based upon your calling.
Yeah, but I don't.
Because there is a need for those to spread the knowledge to help wake people up. Because there are counter forces, that's just like in your body. Your body catches a particular virus or bacteria that starts to attack your body and take your body out of harmony. What does your body do? Your body then generates antibodies to combat that, to put yourself back in harmony. So then if we are cells within the whole body of the earth, that means then you get called in to provide an antidote or to provide a solution or a part of the solution to the problem of the time, because the earth is striving to stay in harmony. So if then perverted or malignant action is destroying the planet, you know what I'm saying, it's put it out of harmony, then the earth is going to call what it needs to combat that. So when you come in, you get in tune with yourself, a part of yourself, what you are motivated, inspired by, then is your work. What is your passion? What really inspires you and motivates you, gets you excited? What is that? That's like your calling. And so then, in you doing that, you will be spreading. Now, the more conscious you get, even more effective you can be at utilize these laws for good. And I'm saying that to say, but deed is spreading. Because everything is energy. Everything is energy. So everybody is always spreading. We're all spreading. But what are we spreading is the point. Everybody's spreading. So now what level of consciousness are you operating from? Determines the quality of your spread and the impact that you have.
If enough people get in tune with the same thinking and feeling, then it will have a tremendous impact on humanity.
Right. And the key word for the Aquarian age is I know. It's knowledge. And the key energy for the Aquarian age is humanity or human. So where is the key word on the chart? So it means that the next 2,000 years is going to deal with intelligence, higher mind in the field of consciousness, or up on the level of spirit. So as we become knowledgeable of these things, you then have your foundation from which you operate from. And you just express it in your own unique way. But we still are all coming from the same universal foundation. And that was the whole issue, because all this came out of Stolen Legacy. This whole series is in the context of Stolen Legacy. And so in Stolen Legacy, there's two major points. The major point is that the original mystery system was a system of salvation and true liberation. And we say we're fighting for liberation. So if we're fighting for liberation, true liberation is to become an initiate. It's the highest form of liberation. And so the baddest freedom fighters are going to be initiates. So then if we then want to truly master the revolution of the change, truly, then we have to conquer self. It means you got to go through this process. You got to learn this knowledge. And so the age of Aquarius is the age of humanity. That's interesting. It's in the car. So you have to bring some books in the car. I'll go get them. Because it talked about a scripture from the Bible that gives indication of the Aquarian age, because it talked about following the man with the jar to the upper room, and there's some other quotes there. But the significance of it is dealing with human energy. Where the age of Pisces is still dealing with the fish, living in two worlds. Now the image or the icon for the Aquarian age is humanity, humanism, humanity, and all the other equivalents that relate to that becomes the major thing. And so then you then look at the world and you can see what side people are on. You can see what the kind of policies and things, are they harmonious policies? Are they really cultivating humanity or inhumanity? So anyway, move on. I'm going to read a couple more pieces, and this we're going to flip it over, and then we'll go further. Oh, this is heavy. It says harmony is law, a priori, expressed in nature through and through, and though the existence of harmony is ever present to intelligence, with these key words, it remains incomprehensible in itself. Whenever a proportion is given, be it metaphysical in the initial vision of oneness. Now see, if we went in, if the people who were in the class on geometry and number will understand what they're talking about here. What are they talking about? Whenever a proportion is given, be it metaphysically in the initial vision of oneness, or in splitting of a living cell. Right. And what is the initial fission? Right. What is that? In one sense, yes, it's that you're using the metaphors to try to explain the concept. But the original scission, the initial scission, the original condition was nothing. There was nothing, everything was everything. Nothing was separate or differentiated out. And that represents two things. It also represents the beginning of consciousness. Because in the original development of consciousness, the human mind could not register differences. It saw all things as one big world, a ball of energy. And then as experience evolved, as the humans start to experience more and learn, from experience, they start to be able to differentiate things. This from this, which means they start to name things. So it didn't come into being until it could be named. The name means you give it a distinct identity separate from something else. Everything we read and study is an expression of the human experience. So we have to, or should, because we don't have to do anything, to die. They say also stink, but I think even in I guess if they embalm you on time, you may not even do that. But, and then definitely you ain't got to die either. You can really transform and don't die. But anyway, so the point I'm saying is that you should, excuse me, what we try to do is say that we can't tell you must do anything. That has to be, you always have choice. So that's why I say you should. I correct myself and say should. Because you always have choice. So you ain't got to do it. But the point I was talking about is how, everything is that we're dealing with is in the context of the human evolutionary process. Which means these words, these concepts, these ideas are all expressions of the evolutionary process coming from out of an animal state of being into a human state of being. Because at one point in time we existed as what they call a gregarious horde. We all in this room would just be one mass of people. All the men would copulate with all the females. So the females wouldn't know directly who the father was, but we'd always know who the mother was. And so that was the origin of the matrilineal society, because you always knew the mother of the children, but you may not know the father of the children. Plus, they didn't understand the relationship that copulation had in giving birth either in the earliest times. They thought it was some magical thing that was going on or whatever. But the point I'm making in terms of level of consciousness, we're talking about going back hundreds of thousands of years, probably, where human consciousness was so new to the earth. At one point in time, the earth didn't exist. That means the earth has a history. It has a birth date. That means that once it was just a ball of gas, it coagulated, started creating material, mineral body, then it evolved vegetable, and from vegetable it went to animal. And in that process, that strand of consciousness that was moving towards divinity was always present, and there was a physical form that was coagulating around that pattern that was distinctly in the line of human evolution. Where right along with it, there were other species of animals that may physically look like the same, but they were not of the same strand, and there was a difference. And so we're not gorillas. But at one point in time, we had a physical form that was gorilla-like. the difference between gorilla life and being a gorilla, or a chimpanzee or whatever, in terms of the physical form. But the particular strain of consciousness that was evolving through that particular line was of a human movement. Right. And so that presence was always there. Now someone that say had divine consciousness could see it. You know, you could look at it and like, oh, that's this and that's this and that's that. But anyway, that's a side note. And so the point that got me onto this was talking about consciousness at one point in time did not register differences. And then as it started to register differences, that was a separation. That's when development really started in terms of consciousness. Now the same thing that is true for consciousness is true for galaxies and universes. That means at one point in time, our galaxy did not exist. And in some distant time, you know, eons and eons, it's not going to exist. This energy is going to die out and it's going to change up and evolve into something else. So all I'm saying is when they're talking about here, the initial scission of oneness, that means that oneness then became divided. And then that also is symbolical of the Garden of Eden and how Adam, which represents the human species, then separated into male and female, and that separation then generated or caused generation or genesis. And it's the same thing that's true with your thinking. As long as you're totally united with something, then you're just there with it. Once you can separate yourself from it, then you can start using it as a creative force. Because now you can manipulate it.
What is the initial decision then to birth of consciousness?
Relative to humans it is. But then everything has its same pattern, be it a cell, be an embryo. You know, initially the embryo is united with the sperm and the egg, and it unites and becomes a one, but then it then does what? Splits. So without the split, you wouldn't have genesis. Right. So at one point in time, in terms of our solar system, all this space we occupy probably wasn't nothing here. Until something happened that where energy split and created a process within planets and all this kind of stuff. In consciousness, it's like I am totally controlled by how others define me. So everything that I do is in conformity with some externally defined reality. Then all you do, you're like a robot. You're almost like, what are you like? You're mechanical. You just follow the dictates that is being given to you. Right, like a power. Now once you can separate yourself away from that and look at it, then you can start having free choice. You can choose either do it or not do it based upon something. Or say another example, you're an artist and you just become so identified with a piece of wood, you can't do nothing to the wood. Because you and the wood become one. But not from you uniting with the wood to do something with the wood, but from you just becoming the wood. You understand what I'm saying? Or you totally unite with food. You and eating become one. What's going to happen to you? See, until you can separate yourself from the thing, you won't have reflective thinking, you then can't manipulate the thing. The thing will manipulate you. Because even in terms of initiates, they still have choice in terms of how they choose to implement the knowledge that they have, that is usually guided by the situation. And usually what happens with initiates, they're not wedded to their personalities. So they can go into a situation and then adapt whatever is most appropriate to get their point across in the situation, which means they can operate anonymously. And because they no longer have ego, they don't care if nobody even never knows what they did, as long as the outcome occurs. And a lot of this is happening. It's a lot of spiritual masters that exist today, but you don't even know it. They have menial jobs, and you wouldn't even, might be a security guard, it might be a parking attendant, and because of where we're coming from, there ain't nothing. But it's a whole nother thing going on in terms of their lives.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, they had that certain kind of knowledge. I mean, I met some folks that you never would have knew what they know. People are spiritualists into all kind of stuff, but the daily life that they live is just ordinary. I mean, gardener, this or that. But they don't even, it's not even, they're not hung into, even happen to, for you to see them like that. Right, because they're operating from another level. But here and there, they don't know.
Now, what about to perception in terms of separating yourself from anything else? Create this way. If you can get to the point where you understand that you are more than what you see. You're more than wise people, as you call it, you're more than the human. You get beyond the physical part of you and understanding this big expansion of yourself. Then you get to a point where you can tap into that so that you see the manifestation of the area, and then you can adapt to these things so that what appears to be obstacles that maybe somebody with more education or background or whatever normally wouldn't surmount. You understand that you are more than all of that, more than what the environment has to do. And you understand that you are this great big divine spirit you have that you can manipulate and really things on that level. And that's
You have a question?
Yes, related to two things. The thing that you just mentioned about people doing those 9/11 but living in their lives, and about the other people doing about influencing and somebody else has permanent. That's one of the problems, and it's not like when a person is living a very mundane life in other people's lives and the creative society too. Shouldn't these people that you're speaking of that are on this level be our teachers really? Should they be people that are spreading this knowledge for the public college and living their life?
But they are, because if you look at, the people I'm talking about, they possess knowledge. They went through some form of training, or they have certain gifts. And if you, again, the point I was saying is, they are doing the work, but they're not getting any publicity for it. And I'm saying, I have to say that all around us, we see all the chaos, all the negativity always gets the publicity, it always gets all the press. But simultaneously around us, there's all kind of creative and dynamic things going on. And so if we can not be so wedded ourselves to all of that, like don't believe the hype, all the noise, you start to then become more sensitive to very creative things that are going on all around you that really helps to create some harmony or balance in this case of apparent chaos. And also it may not, it probably is not their particular role. They are affecting their particular community, their particular area, or whatever that thing may be. There's only going to be certain people who have the nature, I guess the aptitude, and have to play the role of being more public, because you need that too. But the real work is not those individuals. The real work is all those other individuals that will really be the ones that can carry the work forward in the day-to-day operation, which it has been our weakness as a people. Because we get hung up on those public figures. And when those public figures get taken out, we don't have those everyday support mechanisms to perpetuate the teaching. And so the people go back to sleep and wait until some other messianic figure comes up to so-called lead them to the promised land. But we also become so identified with that type of personality that we then don't become inspired by and moved by those same qualities in other everyday people that be around us, who really are saying the same words, have the same understanding, because they're not charismatic and they don't have a certain kind of magnetic personality or status. We don't listen to them. And so once you change and you start looking around, you're going to see all kind of people that has all kind of wisdom and insight all around you. And also, as you become less wedded on, or some less wedded on having to play that particular role, then it frees you up. It creates a greater calmness in you that then enables you to get more in contact with your work as well about. Because if that's a part of the role that needs to happen, then that'll be a part of what you have to do. So that's kind of what I was talking about in terms of the real work is really the quiet work. Like what you're getting from me was from a teacher that's probably one of the greatest minds that existed in our particular time period, but is almost unknown.
Because when you elevate ourselves, but we say yourself, we all work as one, and if you don't get the collective to elevate as well, then how can that get out of it? And like these people that have it to this point, and the society manage to elevate themselves to this level, why are they taking more leadership role? And everything is saying that may not be their calling.
Right. You ever read 2000? No, the Healers. That's a good book.
Part 2?
Yeah, of 2000 seasons. The Healers. But basically, what it was talking about is you have different personalities that have different roles to play, and so sometimes, and a lot of times, the personality of those that have the aptitude to really go in depth in this type of knowledge is not the same personality of those that'll be in the limelight and the charismatic speakers and all that, because of the mindset. A lot of times they're very receptive. Many times they might be very introspective and not extroverted but introverted in terms of the way their personalities are and that kind of thing. And so that's why you have to have really have to have a major organizational social order, because certain individuals are chosen to go out and speak because of their quality to be able to speak. But they are not the real knowledge. Right. They're sitting on those, like John Henry Clark said, those professional thinkers who are feeding them the information that they can articulate because of their particular personality. That's why we have to look at it as a whole. Each of us are like, feet and hands and eyes and ears and stomachs and buttocks and all that. And without all of it put together, we're uncoordinated. And so it's interesting because it talks about this in here too, in terms of our major problem is how to cultivate social collective functioning. That's our greatest downfall. We have everything we need, but we don't have the infrastructure to operate collectively together.
Would you think the black community would be kind of retarded then, right?
Yeah, I would say that is right. We're kind of neurotic. Some of us are psychotic. Oh yeah, it's environment. Let's watch. We go right here. It says, whenever a proportion is given, be it metaphysically in the initial scission or separation of oneness or in the splitting of a living cell, there is always a consequence, which we call the scale of 7. Now listen to all of him. just, look at all these, the golden thread, right? There's these reoccurring themes that are constantly like, here it is, here it is, here it is, here it is. That is the universal part that really shows you how all this is together, right? We pass out the sevenfold constitution of humans. We're talking about the 7 chakras. Now we're talking about the humans who evolved out of the noon, who are evolving bodies to be able to reconnect to the highest level of consciousness. So now that means that energy separated out and is on a journey of development. So whenever you separate out, you have a consequence, which we call the scale of 7. This scale can pertain to energy, to sound, and with colors to light. Now, which is super significant for this is, well, first I would say, what comes to your mind when you say energy, sound, color, and light? Energy, sound, color, and light. Yeah. I'm always digging something, right? What do you think I'm digging for? I'm digging for There you go. There you go. There you go. Now, if you think in reverse, right? If this led you to melanin, then melanin leads you back to it. So it also gives you a framework to study operation of melanin. Because that means that this scale of 7 is going to be existing in the operation of melanin. But anyway, that's another field. We'll get to that maybe in another couple of weeks. Here we go. What is specific in an activity? Its function, right? What is specific in an activity? Its function. So what is the function of this activity? Function of this activity is to raise consciousness, right? Because it goes all the way back to the statement that the key to interpretation of ancient religion and philosophy is magic. And magic is the qualities of entities, human and divine, are distributed throughout their various parts. And contact with such entities releases those qualities. What are we talking about here? In terms of sevenfold constitution of humans, these are different levels. As you then contact that level's qualities are released. And we're talking about then gaining techniques to elevate your consciousness from the lower level to the higher level. So then as you then practice those techniques, incorporate those techniques into your life, you elevate your consciousness, you free your soul from imprisonment and become a liberated being who then's work is to influence the liberation of the whole. That's the function of this activity. So it says, it is ordered by an energetic ensemble upon which the physical surroundings have left their mark. This is heavy because look at the key. What's the key word in here dealing with music? Ensemble. So now our logic is changing. Our reasoning is changing. So when we see things, it connects us to a different frame of reference, which gives us a totally different understanding or interpretation of what is being said. That's why initially could write something and people could totally not understand what they're talking about because of their frame of reference. If you change your frame of reference, you would totally reinterpret everything that you experience. That's why the churches keep you locked in to a certain frame of reference. Because then whatever happens, you're going to always interpret it relative to that reference point. If they keep you as we as being black people always relating to ourselves as African Americans in the context of a slave experience, then we're going to interpret our reality relative to that reference point. So it says, and keep on because them will flip and hit you with something. It says, activity does not make the organ. An abstract harmony, energetic in nature, summons the organ, creates it. That's just what I was talking about, right? The human organism is being summoned by a destination. So now, are your behaviors facilitating the arrival at the destination? So what are your behaviors facilitating? What are your behaviors in reference to? The destination, or in direct reaction to your particular environment, which then has been created relative to what reference point? Our particular environment is created off of what reference point? Capitalism, classism, the law of scarcity, fear, insecurity. So now follow. It says, the environment of a tropical swamp will be inhabited by a variety of animals, fowl, amphibians, mammals, and so forth, to all of which this environment is suited. They are not adapted to the milieu, they are born from it. Successful adaptation of certain other living beings to the milieu, should it be necessary, is possible only if the organic entity as a whole is already harmonically oriented in this direction. If it's not already harmonically orientated to it, it will cease to exist. It can't adapt. It won't be able to mutate itself in that direction. It's going to be contrary to its nature. The idea of form antecedes physical definition. This goes back to what? On the self-fold constitution, that when we first started off talking about self-fold constitution, where did this idea come in? That the form antecedes physical definition. Where does that come in at? What concept were we talking about? What was the self-fold constitution? No. Well, yeah, but no. Yeah, but no. I'm getting more specific than that to this. Just follow that frame. What led you to the conversation on the collective unconscious? And look at that square, and what does it say? Yeah, but this particular square, it says physical and etheric. So now what conversation that we have relative to the physical and the etheric that says form antecedes physical definition? Right. That your physical body is an expression of your energetic body. Your energetic body forms the blueprint that then your physical body coagulates around. And in reality, your energetic body forms the electromagnetic quality that then calls for the particular mutation of the cell to match the need of that particular part of the form. I'm saying that the energetic body creates an electromagnetic field that then forms the blueprint that calls for the particular mutation of the cell to match the function of that part of the form. So energetically you have a body. Like when the fetus is forming, there's an energetic pattern already exists within when the cell, when the sperm and the egg unite and create this energetic format. Within that energetic matrix, the cells start to divide and multiply and to start forming themselves around the shape of the invisible pattern or the etheric pattern. Right. And so those particular positions, because eventually it's just like a ball, they're like it almost looks like a sperm, because it's a head and a tail that becomes the brain and the spinal column. And along the spinal column, the arms, the legs, and the organs start to develop themselves in locations in this energetic field. That means that within the energetic field, the particular energetic quality of that organ is already resonating. That's calling the cells to it to mutate themselves, because it all starts from one cell. All the various cells in your body come from one. But then what they do, the DNA in there gets messages that is electromagnetic biochemical messages that says it needs to go this way, and I need to go this way. And so then it changes its chemical makeup to then come to be a heart cell, a brain cell, a liver, a kidney, a toenail, an eye, etc., etc., etc. But now think about this, because see, everything we're talking about going this way, you can go back into it in reverse. And when you go back into a reverse, that gives you the position and the capacity for control. You follow what I'm saying? Remember just the example I gave with melanin, right? So you went into melanin, this took you into melanin, right? So I mean, you can come out of melanin and go back into that. So it creates a pathway for you to go back into the origin of things, back into the origin of the thing. That also then gives you the constituency of the thing, which then means that you can interject various energies into various aspects of that thing, and then you can mutate the thing. You better watch out what I'm telling y'all. Right, and your intelligence in understanding the operation of the energetic field. And this all goes back to music. On this particular form, we deal with music and how. And let me pass this next. Well, let me go through this. So, I got so much information here. Let me pass this out, because that's going to take. These principles or ideas which preside over forms and functions were called Untas in Pharaonic Egypt. It is unfortunate that Egyptology interprets these glyphs as meaning God. There are no gods in existence. God is. Only in created nature do the divine qualities show themselves. Then they exist, and the Untas exist. So a lot of this stuff is real heavy, and so you just can't read it and think you know it. You have to really reflect on it. Like I say, to really become a metaphysician, you have to devour and savor knowledge like your favorite food. I mean, you put it in your mouth, you taste it, you know what I'm saying? You think about it, you feel it. You just can't read it and think you got it, because you'll miss it. You have to struggle with the knowledge. It is the fire and the heat of the struggle that transforms consciousness. Without the heat of the struggle, you will not have an alchemical transformation. So the more you start struggling, think, oh, great, I'm going to be transforming myself.